Our next guest is the lawyer for Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland father with protected legal status who was wrongfully deported to El Salvador. Simon Sandoval Moshenberg is joining us now. Simon, thanks for being with us. First, any updates on your client? Do you know how he's doing and the conditions in the prison?
We haven't heard from him since he was taken to El Salvador. The CICOT torture prison is a place where people are held incommunicado. The family hired a lawyer in El Salvador to try to get in contact with him, but to no success so far.
And now the Trump administration is saying they can't bring him back because he's no longer in U.S. custody. What's your response to that?
Yeah, their attitude towards this case is, we've tried nothing and we're all out of options. They're not even willing to ask the government of El Salvador to turn him back over to our custody. That seems like the first step. Honestly, I expect that if we made a good faith ask to the government of El Salvador, I think there's a high likelihood that the government of El Salvador would actually accede to that request. It's amazing to me that they haven't even so much as picked up the phone to just ask for this man back.
We're showing some pictures of him with his family and then in the custody of folks there in El Salvador. Can you just walk us through how this all came about? How did his family discover he'd been deported to El Salvador, and what are they going through right now?
Well, he had an order of protection since 2019. He was on an annual check-in schedule. He would go and report, spend the morning and then be given an appointment a year later. Earlier this month, ICE officers pulled him over in his car. He had his 5-year-old autistic son in the back seat. They gave him 10 minutes to call the child's mother, or else they said they'd take him into foster care. And then they arrested our client in the presence of his 5-year-old son, who was deeply traumatized. ICE bounced him around from detention center to detention center over the weekend. He was able to call his wife multiple times from multiple different detention centers. And then all of a sudden he just stopped calling. She didn't know what happened to him until a friend of hers spotted him in news coverage of the Venezuelans who were deported on the same airplanes as him.
That's, I'm sure, shocking. I can only imagine what they're currently going through, not having any contact and not knowing what he may be experiencing in that mega prison that has a pretty brutal reputation. I want you to respond to what we keep hearing from the administration officials, including the vice president saying that Abrego Garcia is a member of the MS-13 gang.
We absolutely dispute that. The gang allegations against him all stem from a confidential informant, one of these anonymous tips. That never really materialized. There was no concrete evidence against him. But I think more to the point is that if the government really thought that they had evidence that he was a gang member, there was a legal process that they could go through. First of all, if they thought he committed a crime, they could arrest him and try to convict him of that crime. Second of all, if they thought he was deportable on the basis of his gang membership, they could have brought charges in the immigration court. They did none of those things. They just stuck him on a plane. And now there's no ability to, have a case heard by an immigration court because they short-circuited the whole legal process.
Well, and the administration is acknowledging, again, that they say this was a clerical error or an administrative error, that they were aware of the judge's order back in 2019 to hold any deportation because of credible fear that he could be at risk of his life or torture if he were returned to El Salvador. When you talk about the evidence for deporting the group of people, including your client, to El Salvador, we've heard from other lawyers and families that they believe their clients were targeted as alleged members of the Tren de Aragua gang because of their tattoos. And I just got to listen to this. The expert on this gang told The New Yorker that this is the first time he has ever encountered any reference to the significance of tattoos. Another said a tattoo identifying Tren de Aragua does not exist. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, the MS-13 gang certainly does use tattoos to identify themselves. But my client, his tattoo is a lion. That's not a symbol that's in any way associated with MS-13. There's never been any association there. It really is just because of this anonymous tip, confidential informant from back in 2019. There was never even any evidence of who it was. And in the end, he won his trial in front of an immigration judge back in 2019. The Trump administration at the time had the option to appeal if they didn't agree with the decision. They chose not to appeal.
Simon Sandoval Motionberg, please keep us posted as this case proceeds. Thank you very much for joining us.